So let me share the computer screen. So now it's recording, right? So last week, right? Last week we covered the topic for elasticity, right? The topic for elasticity, right? So we just go through, right? Go through, and then before we cover the topic 4, right? Which is related to consumer preferences and choice, right? So under this elasticity, we learn about price elasticity of demand, right? And then we also learn about income elasticity of demand, cross price elasticity of demand, and then this price elasticity of supply. After we understand all the elasticity, right, we try to see how the elasticity will affect the incidence of tax and then cost of taxation, right? So first of all, right, price elasticity of demand over here, right? So we can see that we want to measure, right? If we change the price, what will be the response for the quantity demand, right? In terms of the percentage, right? So over here, we try to measure the responsiveness of demand to changes in price, right? Changes in price, right? So basically, we have five type of elasticity, right? 5 type of elasticity. We have perfectly inelastic, and then we have inelastic, elastic, and perfectly elastic, right? So this elasticity normally we can observe based on the slope, right? So you notice that your demand curve is straight line, vertical, right? So meaning that it's perfectly inelastic. It's horizontal, meaning that perfectly elastic, right? And then other than that, if you notice that your demand curve, which is downward sloping, which is very steep, right? Meaning that should be inelastic, right? Flat means elastic, right? And then for this unit elastic, meaning that your demand curve must be rectangular hyperbola, right? Rectangular hyperbola, right? So this is the way to calculate. Normally, we use the formula point method to calculate, unless the question asks us to use the midpoint method, right? Because formula point method, because we know price increase or reduce, right? But if we don't know, or the question asks us to use the midpoint, then we use the midpoint method to do it, right? So this is the formula to calculate, right? For the formula point and also for the midpoint. And then we also learn about how elasticity will affect the revenue, right? So when our demand is elastic, so you increase the price, your total revenue will be reducing, right? So if your demand is inelastic, you increase the price, basically your total revenue will be increasing, right? Then for inelastic, meaning that you increase or reduce the price, basically no much changes for your total revenue, right? So and then we can use for uh, let's say as a government, right? So if we observe that, right, the demand is inelastic, right? If you want to raise the revenue, but if the government want to raise the revenue, right, meaning that they should impose a tax on the good that have inelastic in terms of demand, right? If they want to reduce the consumption of certain good, right? So make sure the demand is elastic, right? And then for the firm, if they want to increase or maximizing the profit, right? So they need to observe whether the demand is elastic or inelastic. If the demand is elastic, meaning that they need to reduce the price. If the demand is inelastic, meaning that they can increase the price, right? In order to maximizing the profit, right? So this is the determinant for the demand elasticity, right? First of all, right, whether we have a lot of the good to be substitute or not, right? Meaning that availability of substitute, the proportion of income spent on good, type dimension, and type of the product, right? So this is the determinant for the demand elasticity, whether it become more elastic or less elastic, right? So other than that, we also can calculate based on income, right? If we increase the income or reduce the income, what will be the response for the demand, right? So if the value that we calculate is positive, meaning that the good is normal, right? If the value that we get is negative, meaning that inferior, right? So other than that, we also observe that we can calculate based on this cross price elasticity of demand, meaning that we want to see if the price of other goods change, what will be the response of the quantity of goods demanded that we are interested, right? So we have cross price elasticity of demand, right? The value, if we get positive, meaning that must be substitute. Negative means complement, right? So other than that, what we also go for this price elasticity of supply, right? So under this price elasticity of supply, right, we have like 5 types of elasticity: perfectly inelastic, elastic, unielastic, and then we have perfectly elastic, right? 5 types similar, right? Similar with the demand, right? 5 types, right? Again, we can observe the slope, right? So if we have straight line vertical, meaning that perfectly inelastic, right? If we have our sloping, right, which is much more steep, right, meaning that inelastic, right? Starting from the origin, meaning that unielastic, right? Starting from origin, meaning that unielastic, right? If your demand curve is, if your supply curve is flat, right? Our sloping but flat, right? In terms of the slope, meaning that your supply is elastic, right? Horizontal, meaning that perfectly elastic, right? So the determinant, again, you can see that, right? If we have a lot of input, right, that can be substituted or can be moved easily, right, your supply tend to be more elastic. If we have technological improvement, right, also same, right? Tight dimension, if you have longer time, right, the supply tend to be much more elastic, right? So for the incidence of the tax, right, if you want to see who will bear the burden of the tax, right, so we need to understand the elasticity, right? From here we can see that if your demand is inelastic, right, therefore consumer need to bear more tax, right, meaning that need to pay more tax, right? And then if your demand is elastic, basically a producer, right, they need to pay more tax, right? And then for supply, which is inelastic, right, meaning that supplier or the producer need to bear more tax, right? And then for elastic means in terms of the supply, meaning that this consumer might need to pay more, right? Some of you might ask, right? Is it possible that consumer and producer share a similar share of the tax, meaning that pay the same amount of the tax? Is it possible? Right? Possible, right? Because over here, what we can see is that we summarize, right? The more price elastic the demand, the more elastic the supply, right? So over here, we use the word more, right? More elastic. So what if the demand and supply, we just draw the normal one, right? Normal one. Normal means our sloping for the supply, downward sloping for the demand. We don't draw too steep or too flat. We draw a normal one. Then we can see that the share for this the share of the tax for the consumer and the producer will be the same. Huh? It's possible, right? Because some of you might ask, over here we only study consumer pay more, right? Then producer pay more. What if consumer and producer, right, pay the same amount of the tax or share the same amount of the tax, right? Is it possible? Possible, right? If you draw the demand and supply, right, in terms of the slope, you don't draw too steep or too flat, right? Too flat, no. I just draw a normal one. Then you can get the, the situation where consumer and producer share the same amount of the tax, right? And then we also observe that if we impose a tax, we have a cost, right? Cost over here, meaning that we have consumer and producer, right? So cost to consumer, you can see that consumer lost B and C with the tax, right? And then cost to the producer, you can see that we have D and E. Why we have D and E? Because without the tax, you can see that this is the consumer surplus, this is the producer surplus, right? After the tax, you can see that the consumer surplus become A only, producer surplus become F. So meaning that after the tax, right, there will be a cost to the consumer and to the producer, right? The cost for the consumer is B plus C. Cost to the producer, we have D plus E. And then from the taxation, we also understand that we have a debit loss, right? We have a debit loss, right? So debit loss is equal to the area C plus E, right? Area C plus E, right? So this is the thing that we covered on it, right, last week, right? So any problem? Right. So we have a student say what, but it's a little bit too fast because we already covered last week, right? Just that we go through one more time on it, right? We just go through one more time, right? So I think I don't know talking about never mind, right? It seems like right, this student talk to the this like way, right? Never mind, right? Anyway, right? So any problem, right? So it's not right. Yeah. I noticed, right? So he say the video. Okay, sorry. Right. 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 So if not, then we go for topic 4. Right. We done for topic 3. Right. Remember your midterm test. Right. Your midterm test cover topic 1, topic 2, and topic 3. Right. So we already done for topic 3. You can start to do your revision for your midterm test. Right. Because our midterm test will be 24th July, right? July, right? 24th July, right? So Saturday, right? So you can start to do your revision for your midterm test, right? So now we go for topic 4, right? Last week we learned about consumer preferences and choice, right? Based on the subtopic, right? Utility analysis, right? So last week, right? We say that we have two, right? By utility divided the one that we can calculate and the one that we cannot calculate, right? So we have the one called ordinal, the other one called cardinal, right? So in this principle microeconomics, we are using cardinal, the one that can be calculated, right? Some of you might ask, how come utility we can calculate, right? How come? Right. So later on we discuss again, right? And then we also go for the consumer behavior today, right? Right. And then the topic that we're going to cover is a budget line in different curve. Then we also learn about consumer choice or consumer equilibrium, right? So from here, right? Utility analysis, because we want to analyze, right? So normally, right, we assign figure, but we assume the utility can be calculated. But maybe most of you right, notice that utility, how we can calculate, right? If we assign number, then we can calculate, right? How to assign a number? It depends, right? Based on the person, right? Otherwise, right, we only know that we prefer one to another, that's only. But because utility means satisfaction, right? The person consume the good, right? Therefore, they will receive the satisfaction or benefit. So that person know, right, whether he or she satisfied by consuming the good or not, right? For consuming the good or not, right? So if you only can know, right, whether we prefer one to another, right, we cannot analyze further, right? If we base on the ordinal, right? If we base on ordinal way to do it, right? We know we prefer which one, right? But we cannot analyze, right? Meaning that over here, Right. Just now I mentioned we have the one which is based on ordinal. Right. The one that based on cardinal. Now, if you based on ordinal, meaning that you can rank the order, which one you prefer, right, and so on, right? You can rank the order, right? But we cannot analyze further, right? So if you want to analyze further, we need to use the second one, which is based on cardinal, the one that we can assign figure, the one that we need to assign figure, right? So from here, right? So utility, right? Normally in economics, right? Satisfaction or benefit that we are consuming a good or service we call utility, right? So from here, we assign the figure. So if we assign the figure, right, then we can calculate in terms of the total, right? We have total utility, which is called is the total amount of satisfaction obtained from consumption of a good or service. Generally, more consumption give more utility, right? This is normal, right? You consume more, right? You get more utility, right? So over here, when we say we consume more, right, meaning that we consume the good or we use the service that will give you the utility, that will give you the satisfaction, right? Normally we assume in that way, right? So normally, like you consume an apple, right? So they will give you a utility, right? So the good that can give you a utility, right, will give you a benefit, right? Because sometimes, right, people consume the good that will not give you satisfaction, right? So we assume the person is rational, right? Meaning that people only consume the good that will give them utility, right? No problem. Because some of you might say that, right? What if I consume the good that will not give us satisfaction? Is it possible? Possible, but in reality, we assume the person is normal. When the person is normal, meaning that they only consume the good that will give the utility, right? Give them this utility or satisfaction, right? So if we can calculate based on total, we can based on the marginal also, right? So we have marginal utility is the additional satisfaction gained by consumption or use of one more unit of something. As the quantity consumed of a good increase, right, the marginal utility from consuming it first increases, then decreases and become negative. So we call this as principle of diminishing marginal utility. Right, so we have diminishing marginal utility here, over here. It's normal, right? Because based on this law of diminishing marginal utility, meaning that normally when you consume more of additional one good, right, in a given period, right? So if you keep on consuming more and more, right, you notice that there will be less satisfaction generated by consuming each additional unit of the same good, right? So from here, right, so we have a summary, right, that shows the relation between total utility and the marginal utility, right? So normally, when we observe the total utility increases at an increasing rate, we use the word increases at an increasing rate. Therefore, your marginal utility will increase. When total utility increases at a decreasing rate, your marginal utility will decrease. Right? If you notice that your marginal utility decrease, meaning that, right, we can explain based on the law of diminishing marginal utility, right? And then when total utility at its maximum, then marginal utility is zero. So when total utility decreases, marginal utility will be negative, right? So we can see from the diagram, right? So we have total utility and marginal utility, right? So over here we can see that we have the trick to club, right? So you can see the total utility increase, but the rate is different, right? First of all, increasing at the increasing rate, right? And then after that, increasing at the decreasing rate. Then reach to the maximum and then decrease. Right. So from here you can see that normally when we draw the total utility, we draw in this way, right? Starting from 0, right? Problem because you don't consume anything, right? So you get the 0 for your total utility, right? After that, increasing at the increasing rate, then reach the maximum like this. You can see that here, increasing at the increasing rate over here, right? So you can see that, right? Because in the lecture slide, you can see that this part, right, by right should be something like this, right? Should be something like this. It should be something like this, right? This part only, right? Because some of you like to draw like a, right? Here it doesn't show increasing at the increasing rate, increasing at the decreasing rate. You cannot draw like this, right? Remember, you don't follow this lesson slide, because maybe you in the slide you want to draw something like this is quite difficult, right? So that's why, right? Remember, right? This part, right? This part, section A, right? You must draw something like this, right? So that's why you can see that we have increasing at the increasing rate, right? So your marginal utility will be increasing, and then you have diminishing marginal utility. If your total utility reach the maximum point, your marginal utility becomes 0. If your total utility decrease, your marginal utility will be negative. The value will be negative, right? So remember, right? If you're not sure, right? So you imagine, right? When you are very thirsty, you drink a glass of water, they give you satisfaction. Second glass also give you a satisfaction, right? But the third glass, they still give you a satisfaction, but the satisfaction that you gain become less, right? Then the following glass still give you satisfaction, but become more less and less only, right? Up to the maximum, right? You notice that, right? You already enough drinking the water, right? If you still want to drink another glass of water, right? You will notice that your total utility will be decreasing, right? Meaning that your marginal utility become negative, right? Because you already feel enough drinking the water, but you still want to drink, right? So either you warming up all the water that you drink or what, right? So that is the situation, right? So after we understand, we can analyze the utility, right? Based on total utility, based on marginal utility, and then we have diminishing marginal utility, right? Then we go for utility maximizing condition, right? So equilibrium under this utility maximizing, right? We understand that, right? Over here, there is no way to increase utility by changing the bundle of goods purchased. Over here, we have last dollar spent on each good yield the same marginal utility, right? So from here, we notice that we have utility when we consume the good, and then we also have income, right? Meaning that we need to spend all available income and equal the marginal utility per dollar spent on all goods. Meaning that these two conditions must satisfy, right? In order to achieve utility maximizing, right? This is the two conditions we need to know, right? So especially you are consuming more than one good. More than one good meaning that you're consuming good X and Y, or maybe good X, Y, Z, right? More than one good, right? Then we need to understand. So over here, normally we're using marginal utility over the price, right? Why we need to over the price? You must remember, if when you're analyzing more than one good, right? The price of the good can be different, right? The price of the good can be different. So if you want to measure the marginal utility, right, it's quite difficult because they have a different price, right? So that's why we try to normalize it by divided by the price of the good itself, so that we can compare. Let's say 1 ringgit and 1 ringgit, right? So we can compare whether we achieve this condition or not, right? If we're able to achieve this condition, then we want to utilize all the income, right? Whether we utilize all the income or not. If you are not utilizing, meaning that we still can consume more, right? Follow the first condition, right? The first condition, right? The first condition. This is the second condition, right? Any problem? So normally this condition we use when we consume more than one good, right? Because if you only consume one good, it's no problem, right? Any problem? For example, let's say you only consume apple, right? Apple only. So you consume the apple that will give you the marginal utility equal to the price, right? You consume the apple, the marginal utility of the marginal utility that you gain from the apple until equal to the price, because the price meaning that the cost you buy, right, for the apple, right? Simple, right? But if you consume more than one good, it becomes difficult, right? How do you know? You consume X and Y. This X and Y, right? So will give you satisfaction, equal satisfaction or not, right? Especially when they have different price for the good. So we need to divide it by the price of good itself, right? And then if we're able to achieve the first condition, right? Given that we want to utilize all the income, right? So then we need to fulfill the second condition, right? So in order to maximizing the utility, we need to fulfill the first and the second condition, right? No problem. Especially we are consuming the more than two good, right? More than one good, more than one good, right? So this is the example. You see, you can see over here we have good X and Y, right? So meaning that more than one good, we need to use this way to do it, right? More than one good, right? So over here, given the consumer income, we have income, right, to spend on both good X and Y, whose unique prices are 2 ringgit and 4 ringgit respectively. In order to maximize this utility, which quantity of X and Y should the consumer purchase, right? So meaning that what will be the combination of good X and Y that will maximizing the utility for the consumer? They said, given that if the consumer utilize all his income, 32 ringgit, right? So first of all, we need to calculate the marginal utility, right? The marginal utility. You can see that the marginal utility initially, right, 9 become 8, meaning that we have diminishing marginal utility. Right? Over here also same. Right? Wait, the more you consume, right, the less utility will be gained, right? Based on the marginal utility you see from here. So we have diminishing marginal utility, right? Because the price of the good is different, so we divided by the price of good itself. So you can see that, right, we want to find the first condition. You can see 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 3.5, 3.5, same, right? Now we can determine the first condition. How many bundle we have? Right. So we have 3 bundle or 3 combination. Right. One is 1x and 6y. The second one is 2x and 7y. The third one we have is 3x and 8y. Right. So over here, we fulfill the first condition. But now the second condition is we try to utilize all the income that we have. Right. We want to see what will be the maximum utility that we can gain if we utilize all the income that we have. So we go for the second condition, right? So we notice that combination number 1, we only utilize 26 ringgit only, meaning that our utility still can be increasing if we consume more, right? For X and Y, because we still have left, we still have money left, right? Combination 2, we notice that we get 32, meaning that you utilize all your income, right? So meaning that your utility should be maximizing for this moment, right? The third one is it's over, right? It's preferred, but it's over your income, right? Meaning that the third combination, right? By right, like give you a higher satisfaction, but because you have limited income, right? So you cannot achieve by higher satisfaction because of your income, because it's constrained by your income, right? You have limited budget. So the best the combination that you can choose is based on combination 2, right? Meaning that you can maximizing the utility based on the limited income that you have. Right? So combination 2 will be the answer, right? Any question you want to ask so far? Right. Any question you want to ask so far? So far we cover our utility can be analyzed because we assign the figure, right? So it's based on cardinal. And then after that, we want to maximizing the utility, right? So we want to maximizing the utility. Let's say we analyzing more than one good, right? More than one good, and then we have limited income. So we need to fulfill 2 conditions, right? So this is the thing only. And so far we cover. Now we go further, right? If we understand this is the basic idea, but just now we done, But if we understand that this is the basic idea, we need to understand, right? First condition and the second condition, right? Now we go for analyze the consumer behavior. How the consumer behave, right? So the theory of consumer behavior can be used to explain how consumer allocate their limited income to maximize satisfaction. Right? We want to observe if the consumer have a limited income, how the consumer use their limited income to maximizing the utility, his or her utility, right? So this is what we call consumer behavior. How the consumer behave if they have limited income, in terms of the consumption, right, of the good in order to maximizing the utility, right? So from here, there are 3 steps, right, when we want to analyze the consumer behavior. First of all, we observe that most of people have limited income, right? So in this case, we have budget constraint, right? Then we need to, from the budget constraint, we can actually draw the budget line, right, to show the budget constraint, right? And then the second step, right, we need to understand the consumer preferences, whereby we can draw in the graph based on the indifferent curve, which is used to describe how and why people prefer one good to another, right? So far we have limited income, and then we know how the consumer preference, right? Then we go for optimization. Given that we know the consumer preferences and the limited resources, then we want to answer what amount and type of good will be purchased, right? So what will be the quantity of the amount of good that the consumer will purchase in order to maximizing the satisfaction, right? So what combination of good will consumer buy to maximize their satisfaction? So meaning that in this case, indifferent curve must be tangent to the budget line, right? Must be tangent to the budget line, meaning that later on we try to go through this again, right? Indifferent curve tangent to a budget line, meaning that we fulfill the 2 conditions. Later on, we go through again these 2 conditions. Right? If we have indifferent curve tangent to the budget line, meaning that, right, we fulfill these 2 conditions. Right? We fulfill these 2 conditions, just that in different way only. Right? So 3 steps. First, budget constraint. Second, consumer preference. Then we go for optimization. 3 steps if you want to analyze the consumer behavior. Right? First of all, budget line. Right? So budget line, somehow, right, you go to the textbook, they also use the word budget constraint. Same meaning, budget line and budget constraint, they represent the same meaning, right? So basically it shows the various combination of goods the consumer can afford. They use the word effort because income, budget line means income, right? So whether you can buy or not, right, can afford, right? Can afford given his or her income and the prices of the 2 goods, right? So over here, based on the income, right, whether they afford to buy the good or not, right? So that's why when we draw a budget line, right, you can see that must be straight line, must be straight line, right? Downward sloping, must be straight line, downward sloping. Because if you have the income which is 100, let's say this is your income, 100, right? Right, this is your income, 100, right? And then this is the price for soda and for the movie, right? Now this thing is fixed, because we have limited income, right? So and then the price basically is fixed, right? In the market, is fixed, right? What if you want to spend all the income on the soda, even that you know the price of soda, right? If you spend 100 ringgit, you notice that, right? You have point A, right? Meaning that you use your income only buy the soda only, right? You get 10 soda, right? And then if you spend all the income, right, for this movie, right, given that the price of movie is 20, right? So how much you get for the movie? 5. This is which is over here is point F, right? So because the price and the income is fixed, basically, right, meaning that you can draw a straight line, downward sloping. Why must be downward sloping? Because you increase the number of movie, right? So the ability for you to buy the soda will be reducing, but because you split your income, right? You split your income, right, for the movie and for the soda, right? That's why when you increase the number of movie, right? So the number of the soda that you can purchase will be getting less and less, right? So it should be straight line, downward sloping, right? So over here we have the portion or the section which is affordable, unaffordable, right? Affordable meaning that within your income, right? Within your income, outside the line, meaning that unaffordable, right? Meaning that beyond your ability, beyond your income level, right? Meaning that you don't have much income to purchase, right? Even though you can consume more soda and movie, but you don't have enough income, but to do so, right? So that's why we have unaffordable, but this is affordable, right? Problem? Right, so our income is fixed. The price of soda also fixed. Price of movie is also fixed. So we can draw the budget line which is down stopping, right? So affordable and unaffordable. Now we go for the budget line, which is when we change the price. Just now we say what? The price of the good remain no changes. Right? We have fixed income. The price is fixed also. What if we change the price? If you change the price, basically you notice that, right, your budget line will be rotate, right, rotate. But let's say if the price of one good increase, your budget line will be rotate inward, right, become more expensive. For example, you can see that movie, right, the price of the movie increase. So meaning that the number of movie will become less, right? So rotate inward, right? No problem. The price of soda remain no changes for this moment, right? But if the price of movie decrease, right, meaning that it will be rotate outward because the number of movie now become greater, given that now the price of the movie become more cheaper, right? No problem. So that's why rotate outward, right? No problem. You can see the price expensive, right? So the number of movie become less, right? Become more cheaper, the number of movie become larger. Right? So you can see that the slope of the budget line will be changing because rotate, the slope of the budget line will be changing, right? Now, what if the income, right? You change the income because just now we say our income is 100. What if we have more income, right? So if we have more income, basically meaning that, right, your budget line will be shift. We use the word shift. We don't use rotate. We use the word shift outward. For example, let's say our income initially is 15. Right now become double. Income become double. Let's say become 30. Right, meaning that the ability for you to buy, right, soda and also movie will be increasing. Right? So if your income increase double, meaning that the ability of to buy the soda and then consume the movie also double lah. Right, you can see, right, 5 become 10, right, 2.5 become 5, right, because your purchasing power become double, right, if your income increase double, right, right, so meaning that there are more quantity of good that you can afford to purchase, right, right, problem. So that's why shift outward. If your income decrease, right? So if your income decrease, meaning that your budget line will shift inward, right? Let's say suddenly, right, because of the COVID-19, right? So your income affected, right? Instead of 30, become 15, meaning that your purchasing power will be reducing, right? Meaning that even though the price of soda and movie remain no changes, right? But your purchasing power will become less, right? Because over here you can see that holding prices constant, price remain no changes, right? Your income change only. That's why your budget line must be shift inward, right? So this is the case, huh? Right. So after we understand the budget line, so we can form the equation, right? We can form the equation, right? So over here, this is our income, right? This is our income, but this is the price of the good X, price of the good Y. So the quantity, good X and good Y, right? So this is our equation for the budget constraint, right? So over here, let's say we have the example. Alex have an income of 80 ringgit per week to spend on food and clothing. Right, so the price for the food is 1 ringgit per unit. For clothing, it should be 2 ringgit per unit. Right, so determine different combination of goods that Alex can afford to purchase. Right, afford to purchase, over here. Because based on the income, 80 ringgit per week. Right. So first of all, we form the budget line equation. Right. So now, what will be the quantity for food and clothing? Right. That we can purchase based on the income 80 ringgit per week. Right. So we have a table. Right. So first of all, if you allocate all your income, right, to purchase food only, no, to purchase clothing, to purchase clothing, you can see that it's 40. Right. If you allocate all your income to purchase food only, you have 80. Right. Since your income is fixed, over here, 80, so basically, right, you just draw a straight line only because you define the intercept, right? So basically, you can see that this is our budget line, right? So you just draw a straight line after you find the point A and point G, because it's downward sloping, right? And it is straight line, right? It is straight line, right? We point B, we can find it, but it's quite difficult. So normally in the graph, we normally find the intercept. Right, intercept much more easy to find. We use all the income divided the price of the clothing, for example, we get 40. Income divided price of the good, we get 80. So because our income is fixed, so we just draw downward sloping, straight line downward sloping. Right. The slope of the budget line is measured based on this, negative. Over here we have a negative value, meaning that downward sloping. Right. Why we have this slope measured in the price for the food over the price of the clothing? Why? Because if we put clothing on the vertical, food on the horizontal, in the mathematics, we understand that, right, if this is our budget line equation, right, if this is our budget line equation, right, so if we rearrange, right, because C is over here, right, so let's say we arrange, right, you can see that, right, this part represent the slope, right, represent the slope, because normally we in the mathematics that we learn, let's say from 5 or secondary school, we learn, if we draw a diagram, this is y, this is x, right? So normally we arrange in that way, right? right? If this is our sloping, right? If downward sloping, then we have negative. So B over here, together with the positive sign or negative sign, meaning that the slope. But if we arrange according to this fashion, right? So we can see that this price of the food over price of the clothing represent the slope for the budget line, right? Represent the slope for the budget line, and you have a negative, meaning that downward sloping, right? Downward sloping. That's why over here you can see that we have negative value, right? So the slope of budget line is the negative of the ratio of the price of two goods. The slope indicates the rate at which the two goods can be substituted without changing the amount of money spent, because we fix the money here, right? The money spent, right? So over here we get 0.5, meaning that half clothing must be forgone to get an additional unit of food, right? Because you get 0.5, right? Example, right? Alex have an income of 80 ringgit per week to spend, right? So we know the price of the food and the price for the clothing. So from here we can determine directly the slope of the budget line, which is negative 0.5, meaning that to increase 1 unit of food, Alex will forgo 0.5 unit of clothing. The income spent remain constant. Over here is 80 ringgit, right? This is the meaning, right? So far, any problem? Clear about the budget line? So far, we already covered the budget line, right? So we understand that budget line show, right, the combination of good which is we can purchase, right? And then we also understand that the budget line can be rotated if the price of a good change, right? And also can be shift if we increase the income or we decrease the income, right? And then the slope of the budget line we can measure based on the price ratio of the goods, right? No problem. So this is the thing that we cover, right? Now, if you don't have any question, then we continue. Right. Now we go for second step. Second step is related to the indifferent curve and utility maximization. Right. So under this second step, right, consumer preferences can be represented graphically using indifferent curve. We try to draw a graph, right, to represent the consumer preferences, right? So the curve that we are drawing in the graph, we call it indifferent curve. Right, over here indifferent. Right, we name it indifferent, right? So indifferent curve is a curve representing all combination of market basket that provide a consumer with the same level of satisfaction. Right, you can see that they use the word same level of satisfaction, right? So that's why we use the word indifferent, meaning that you consume combination A or you consume combination B, actually no different. They give you the same level of satisfaction. That's why we have the word indifferent, right? So a person will equally satisfy with either basket, right? Now we have the indifferent curves, right? So we have combination J, K, L, N, right? So if we know this is the combination, right? So we can draw our indifferent curve, right? So we connect all the combination, we have our indifferent curve, right? So for consuming good A and good B, right? Here based on quantity, right? So some of you might ask, JKLM, right? So if we draw the indifferent curve that connect this JKLM, meaning that they will give you a same level of satisfaction, right? Same level, meaning that you consume combination J or you consume combination M, actually no different, right? You still eat, meaning that you still happy, right? You cannot, let's say you cannot consume J, combination J, right? Let's say unit of A, 2 unit of B, but you able to consume combination M, right? Meaning that 3 unit of A, 8 unit of B, you still consider happy, right? Because you can consume more B, less A, or you can consume more A, less B, right? Still fine. You are okay, right? Your level of satisfaction still remain the same, right? But some of you might ask, how do I know combination J, K, L, M will give you a same level of satisfaction? How do I know? Right? To answer this question, right? To answer this question, you need to ask the consumer, right? You need to ask the consumer, right? The consumer will tell you, right? We don't know. This one represents the consumer preference, right? Right. Can you hear my voice? Can you hear my voice? I think just now we have internet problem, right? Right. So clear. So we continue, right? We continue. Right. Just now, right? We try to answer, right? Because some of you might ask, how do I know combination J, K, L, M will give me the same level of satisfaction? Same level of satisfaction. How do I know? Right? We don't know. We need to ask the consumer. Right? We need to ask the consumer. Right? The consumer will tell you. Maybe you ask the consumer, if you're able to consume the combination J, right? Were you happy? Right? They will tell you yes. What if you cannot consume the combination J? Let's say you can consume the combination K. Are you still happy? Right? They will tell you. If they say yes, then you go and ask, right? Combination L, combination M. Right? So the consumer will tell you, right? They will tell you says that combination J, K, L, M actually for me is equal happy. I'm fine, right? Consume any combination because they will give you the same level of satisfaction. We need to ask the consumer, right? In order to draw this indifferent curve. For example, when your mother asks you, right, what kind of boyfriend you want to want him to become your boyfriend, right? Your mother need to ask you, right? Right. So maybe your mother can let's say your mother might ask you, right? That person must be rich and handsome. You might say yes, right? Or maybe that person not very rich but handsome. You also say yes, can become a boyfriend, right? So meaning that, right? We need to ask the consumer, right? You need to ask the consumer so that you will know whether they will give the same level of satisfaction or not, right? So now when we draw it, we draw downward sloping and convex, right? Because you increase the combination, right? Let's say you increase the quantity B, you need to reduce the consumption for quantity A, right? Right? So that because you want to maintain same level of satisfaction, right? You want to maintain, right? So it should be convex, right? So first of all, downward sloping and convex, right? So after we understand the indifferent curve must be downward sloping and convex, then we go for the property of indifferent curve, right? So basically we have 4 properties for the indifferent curve. First of all, higher indifferent curve are preferred to lower one. This is the first thing, right? And then the second thing is that indifferent curve are downward sloping. Just now already mentioned, must be downward sloping, right? And then indifferent curve do not cross. They cannot cross, right? And then indifferent curve are bound inward, meaning that must be convex, right? So the first one, right? Higher indifferent curve are preferred to lower one, right? Higher indifferent curve means that they will give you higher level of satisfaction, right? So consumer usually prefer more of something to less of it. Higher indifferent curve represent larger quantity of good than to lower indifferent curves. The further indifferent curve from the origin, meaning that higher the utility, also represent more of both good that can be consumed. Right? Let's say we have indifferent map. We use the word an indifferent map, meaning that we draw a lot of indifferent curve. Right? We draw a lot of indifferent curve. So you can see that the indifferent curve that are far away from the origin, representing higher amount of the good that you can, meaning that more unit of good you can consume, right? Because the satisfaction become larger, right? If you're far away from the origin, right? No problem, because you can consume more, right? Then over here, some of you might notice that a line intersect each higher indifferent curve, reflect more of both groups, right? Over here means what? If you notice that somehow, right, the textbook over here, they use a line, they draw a line, because they want to show you the idea, right? Says that indifferent curve farther from origin depict higher level of utility. Why? Because they can consume more goods, right? For example, they draw a line like this. Right, this line just a guide to show you that, right, the amount of the good that can consume become larger. You can see that, right, become larger. But if your indifferent curve is far away from the origin, so we use the line as the reference. And so that's why you can see that they have the word a line intersection each indifferent curve, right, reflecting more of both good, right? So this is sometimes the textbook using this line, right, to tell you, right? So normally we don't draw it, normally we don't draw this line, right? Right, this line just as a reference to show that your indifferent curve far away from the origin represent higher utility. At the same time, you can consume more goods, right? And then for the property 2, indifferent curve are downward sloping, right? Meaning that a consumer is willing to give up one good only he or she get more of the other goods in order to remain equally happy. Because over here we say equal, remain equally happy. You increase one, the other one must be reduced, right? If you don't want to reduce, meaning that, let's say you don't want to reduce, right? Meaning that you increase one, another one you also want to increase, meaning that your utility will become higher, right? No problem. Let's say over here, let's say this is 5. So if you want to increase the utility, meaning that quantity of the video still remain the same, but the quantity of the pizza must be increased, right? So you get higher utility. But if you want to maintain equally happy, meaning that you must reduce the number of video in order to increase the number of pizza, right? You have like this. So that's why must be downward sloping, because we want to remain equally happily, right? So if the quantity of one good is reduced, the quantity of the other good must be increased. So that's why, right, most indifferent curve slope downward, right? Over here we use the word most, right? Most, meaning that in the normal situation, if you consume the good that will give you utility, right, normally should be downward sloping. Normally should be downward sloping, right? Another property is that indifferent curve do not cross, right? So again, you can see that this is a line just I mentioned to you. Certain textbook is still drawing this line to show you that, right, the indifferent curve is actually far from the origin, represent higher utility. You can see that combination J and K, right? From here you can see that more is better, right? Far away, your indifferent curve is far away from the origin, meaning that for this combination K, you can consume more video and pizza compared to the combination J. By right, combination K will give you higher level of utility if you compare with the J, right? If you base on this line as a reference. But if you cross, what will happen? Point J and I should make the consumer equally happy because along the same indifferent curve, J and I, same indifferent curve. equally happy. At the same time, point I and K should make the consumer equally happy. At the same time, because they intersect, equally happy. Right? If we can conclude, this implies that J and K will make the consumer equally happy. Is it true? The answer should be no, right? Why? Because you follow the property number 1, right? So K is preferred compared to J. Why? Because K have more of both good compared to J. Right? That's why we cannot cross the indifferent curve, right? Must be down sloping and then cannot cross, right? No problem. And then indifferent curve are bound inward. Why must be bound inward? Why cannot be straight line? Right? Normally we observe when you consume the good that can give you a satisfaction, right? So you increase one good, another good you need to reduce, right? So when people are willing to trade away good that they have abundant and less willing to trade away good of which they have little. So meaning that normally we observe if you have a lot of the good, right, you are willing to trade away, but you have a very little or good, right, you are reluctant to trade away. Like for example, let's say, right, you have a lot of A4 paper, and your friend asks you, right, to give A4 paper, right, meaning that borrow the A4 paper from you, right, you are very happy, you are willing to borrow, right, or to give the A4 paper to your friend, right, or willing to help, right. But what if you only have 2 pieces of A4 paper, right? Your friend asks you to give him another A4 paper, right? Another piece of A4 paper. You are reluctant to give, right? This is what we observe in reality, right? So these differences in consumer marginal substitution rate because his or her indifferent curve are bound inward. Because of that, we notice that when we calculate the marginal rate of substitution, right, becomes smaller and smaller, right? So that's why your indifferent curve must be bound inward, right? For example, point A, you can see that you have a lot of clothing. The food is very less. So if you want to increase 1 unit of food, you are willing to trade away a lot of clothing, right? Willing to trade away a lot of clothing. But when your clothing becomes less and less, you can see that the willingness for you to trade away becomes less and less, right? For 1 unit of food become less and less, right? So from here you can see that the shape of indifferent curve describe how a consumer is willing to substitute one good for another. A to B give up 6 clothing to get 1 food. D to E give up 2 units to get 1 food. So that's why, right, you can see that it must be bound inward, right? So the slope of the indifferent curve, normally we measure based on the marginal rate of substitution, right? This marginal rate of substitution means how a person trade one good for another, right? Trade away one good for another. So meaning that a maximum amount of good a consumer is willing to give up in order to obtain 1 additional unit of another good. So it measures the slope of the indifferent curve, right? So it should be down sloping, because measure the slope. That's why we have a negative sign over here, right? Because your indifferent curve is down sloping. That's why you have a negative sign, right? Meaning that you increase the F, the food, the clothing must be reduced, right? No problem. So marginal rate of substitution, right? So it becomes smaller and smaller, right? Now, the MRS decreases as we move down the indifferent curve, right? So over here, along an indifferent curve, there is a diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Right? Again, if you see the value becomes smaller and smaller, this situation we can call it diminishing marginal rate of substitution, right? So that's why your marginal rate will be getting smaller and smaller, so it will be decreasing, right? Now, so far, any problem? So far, do you have any problem? Right, so you had internet problem, you try to join again, right? If you miss out certain part, then you just go to the video again, because it's recorded, right? So no problem, Now, if no problem, right? Let's say we go for additional thing, right? This additional slide is available in the Weber, you download, right? Now, we go through one more time and the thing that we learn so far, right? So far, we cover the property of the indifferent curve, right? We know that indifferent curve must be downward sloping, right? And then it must be convex. And also, we go for the property, right? So higher indifferent curve are preferred to the lower one. Downward sloping, again, cannot cross, right? And then indifferent curve are bound inward, right? Bound inward, meaning that when you draw the indifferent curve, right? Right, again, right. You notice that the indifferent curve that we're drawing like this, you don't draw the indifferent curve like this, right? Because we said bound inward, you don't draw like this, Some of you like to draw like this, U shape, No, because we say downward sloping, bound inward, right? We don't draw something like this, right? Draw something like this means wrong, You are not fulfilling the property of the indifferent curve, right? So this is the thing we understand, right? Now, let's say we go for a special case, right? Special case, right? Again, indifferent curve with different shape imply a different readiness to substitute, right? Rather than just now bound inward, downward sloping bound inward, we sometimes observe that we have a different type of the indifferent curve, right? This is the normal one we are drawing, bound inward. Like this is for, let's say, for good y, good x, right? So indifferent curve. This is normal one. But sometimes, right, the shape of the indifferent curve, right, it can be different from the normal one. Bound, but because we call it bound inward, right? This is the normal situation. But sometimes the good is considered perfect substitute. We use the word perfect substitute and perfect complement. We had two special cases, right? So if we have these two special cases, meaning that the shape of the indifferent curve might be different. For example, let us say we have perfect substitute. Perfect substitute means that perfect substitute one with another. Let's say we have apple juice and orange juice. Right? They are considered perfect substitute one with another, meaning that if you cannot drink the orange, these are apple juice, you can substitute with the orange juice. No problem. Just like Pepsi and Coca-Cola. No different. Perfect substitute one with another. For most of people, they feel no different, right? Now, because of that, you can see that our indifferent curve must be straight line, down sloping. It cannot be convex, right? Cannot be convex. So from here, you can see that the two good with straight line indifferent curve are considered perfect substitute. From here, you can see that, right? Over here, if you measure based on the marginal rate of substitution, right? So you can see that if you're using 2 divided by 1, meaning that 1 unit of what 1 unit of orange juice equivalent to the 2 apple juice, because over here changes of y over changes of the x, right? So you increase the orange juice, meaning that two units of apple juice must be reduced, right? Because you measure the slope, right? You measure the slope, right? Right? If you measure the slope over here, meaning that, right, 4 divided by 2, meaning that you get -2, right? So from here, right, the marginal rate of substitution is a fixed number. The value is fixed. You can see that still the same, right? Along the way, you measure, right? Along the way, you measure, the value is still the same, right? Which is different from the just now, the normal one, which is bound inward. Bound inward, when you calculate the marginal rate of substitution, the value will be decreasing over here. The value will be decreasing. But for this case, because it's perfect substitute, the value is fixed, right? Meaning that along the indifferent curve, right, fixed amount of the group will be forgone, right? Will be the same, right? So this is the case for perfect substitute. Then somehow we have perfect complement. Right? Perfect complement meaning that you must use together. Right, so if you must use together, meaning that become like this, become L-shape. For example, you have the thing that you must use together, for example, shoe. Must be in pair, right? Must be in pair, right? So that's why we have right shoe and left shoe. Right, so you must use in a fixed proportion. Therefore, they will give you satisfaction. Right, from here you can see that if you have one left shoe and one right shoe, they'll give you a satisfaction. What if you only have one right shoe, right, and then you increase the number of left shoe? It doesn't change the utility, right? It doesn't change the utility unless you increase. Now you have two pair of the shoe, right? So that's why your utility will be increasing. So over here you can see that when you calculate the marginal rate of substitution, you must remember marginal rate of substitution meaning that you substitute one with another. Over here, you cannot substitute one with another. Right? For example, let's say you have right shoe. You increase the number of the left shoe. Right? So how do you define marginal rate of substitution? Right? For example, you can see that if your y is greater than x, let's say this is x, this is y. Right? Given that over here, the value here remain no changes. If you calculate the slope, right? You calculate the slope MRS. Let's say the changes of the y or changes of the x, right? So your x remain no changes. So changes of what divided by the 0, you get infinity, right? What if you increase the number of the x, the y still is the same, because horizontal over here, right? So meaning that over here, right, becomes 0 over the changes of the x. Then you get 0, right? What if, right, over here you're using x equal to y, right? Let's say 1 and 1. Can you calculate the marginal rate of substitution? We cannot calculate because over here measure the changes. Here no changes, right? We use in a fixed proportion. We cannot define, we cannot calculate. Based on the formula for this MRS, we cannot calculate, right? Because we must change. Here no changes, so we cannot calculate. So in this case, right, either you get 0, infinity, or undefined. So at the end, right, for this perfect complement, we don't have MRS in other way. In the simple way, we cannot calculate the MRS, right? Any problem? So this is the special case, right? Any problem for the special case, right? Any problem? If not, then we continue. So after we understand, right, the indifferent curve, right, the indifferent curve. Now we combine the budget line with the indifferent curve. Right. Now we combine the budget line with the indifferent curve. So we go for consumer choice or consumer equilibrium. Given preferences and budget constraint, how do consumer choose what to buy? Now you know your preference, you know your income. You need to select what are the goods that you can buy in order to maximizing your satisfaction given that you have limited income, right? So this is what we are going to do, right? Consumer choose a combination of goods that will maximize their satisfaction given the limited budget available to them. So we combine two together. So from here, we assume, you can see the word we assume, rational consumer. The consumer must be rational, right? They choose good to maximize the satisfaction they can achieve given the limited budget available to them, right? So they try to utilize all the money that they have in order to maximizing the utility or the satisfaction, right? The condition for constrain the utility maximization, right? Consumer optimization or consumer equilibrium, right, occur when the consumer spend all income. This occur where an indifferent curve is tangent to the budget line. So meaning that if you notice that your indifferent curve tangent to the budget line, meaning that you utilize all your income, at the same time you maximizing your satisfaction, right? So if we tangent, meaning that the slope of the indifferent curve, which is measured by the MRS, is equal to the slope of the budget line, right? So at the end, at equilibrium, this is the condition. You can see that we have a negative sign, because MRS downward sloping, the slope for the budget line or the budget line also downward sloping, right? That's why we have a negative, right? So some of you might say, wait, why certain textbook they ignore the negative sign? Because negative they cancel out, right? No problem. So from here we can conclude, in order to maximizing the utility to achieve the consumer equilibrium, right, we must achieve the situation where our indifferent curve tangent with the budget line, right? So this is the condition that we want to achieve, right? Must be tangent, we use the word tangent, but we don't use the word intercept, we use the word tangent, right? So in the graph, right, this is our budget line, When we say tangent, meaning that this is the situation, point C, right, point C, right? So you can see that if the slope for the MRS is, let's say we calculate based on 20 divided by 40, right? How do we calculate, right? How do we calculate? Based on the changes, right? The changes for the clothing over the changes for the food. This is one way to do it, right? No problem. And then the price ratio usually is given, price for the food and price for the clothing. So we just put it together only. You can see that at point C when they tangent, right? So you get 0.5, right? Over here you can see that negative cancel out, right? So at the end becomes 0.5, right? So from here we can conclude. Hello? Right, can you hear my voice? Right. My place is raining, right? So maybe they affect the internet connection, right? But anyway, right, we continue, we continue. Now can hear, right? Now we continue. Sorry, because my place now is raining, very heavy, right? Very heavy, right? So it affect the internet connection, right? Now, just now what we have over here is that if you want to achieve the consumer equilibrium, meaning that must be on the budget line, and then the highest attainable indifferent curve. Because we have a lot of indifferent curve, right? Must be the highest one, attainable, right? So the marginal rate of substitution between the two goods equal to the relative price of two goods, right? So this is the condition we need to achieve in order to achieve the consumer equilibrium, right? For example, right? For example, over here, let's say we have a graph. Right. We have a graph over here. So from here, we can see that this is our indifferent curve. Right. This is the indifferent curve. Right. So it's downward sloping, bound inward, the normal one. Right. So, but other than this indifferent curve, we also can draw another one. Right. So usually we have a lot of indifferent curve. Right. Because this is the preference for the consumer. But if they're able to consume more A and B, basically the indifferent curve will be far away from the origin, right? Far away from the origin, meaning that show a higher level of satisfaction. Huh? Right. So this is our indifferent curve. We have a lot, but we had limited income. Right. We must remember we had limited income. Right. Over here, indifferent curve 4 is much more preferred compared to the indifferent curve 1. Right, because you can consume more goods in terms of A and B. Right, sure you prefer indifferent curve 4. Right, but because we have limited income, we need to consider. Right, for example, our income is like this only. Right, you can see that the color, the green color, show the portion which is affordable. Right, this is the portion which is affordable. Right, so you can see that, right, indifferent curve 1 and indifferent curve 2 is within the affordable area. In the affordable area, meaning that you still can maximizing the utility, right? Because we still have left of money, right? We still have left of money, so we need to go until we utilize all the money, where your indifferent curve tangent with the budget line, point X, right? So over here, right? W is preferred, but you don't have enough money. You need more income. Right? So from here, which point do you want? We want W, because W give you higher level of satisfaction compared to the indifferent 3, 2, and 1. Why? Because you can consume more goods, right? And then which point you can, right? So over here, right? Let's say we have which point is affordable for you to consume. You have T, U, X, and Y is affordable, right? For you to consume. Right, but which point will you choose? T, U, X, W, will you choose which one? Right, will you choose T? No, right, T, it doesn't give you higher satisfaction, right? From here you can see that the slope which is measured by this price ratio for the budget line, if you compare T, I say for T, right, you notice that the value for MRS, right, is larger than the slope for the budget line. Why I'm saying so? Right? Why I say the value for this MRS, right, is greater than the price of the budget line? You can see that when you measure the slope for T, right, you can see it's much more steeper compared to the slope for the budget line, right? So because of that, right, you are not equal. We want to achieve the situation where MRS equal to the price ratio, right? Negative by right, because we cancel out, right? We want to achieve this condition, right? But over here, we're not achieving, right? We are not achieving, right? So we are not achieving, right? So over here also same, we are not achieving the condition. Over here, right? No, this one is different story. This one is opposite for Y, right? For Y, you notice that your MRS, the value is less than the budget line, the slope of the budget line for Y. You can see the slope is like this, right? The budget line much more steeper, right? So we want to achieve equal, right? So meaning that which point can you choose? We have T, U, X, and Y. Basically, we choose X because X achieve this situation, right? No problem. The slope same, right? At the same time, give you higher utility compared to the indifferent curve 1 and indifferent curve 1 and indifferent curve 2, right? Any problem? Do you have any problem? Right? Any question you want to ask about the diagram? No, huh? Right. Now, after you understand, right? Now we go for the thing that we so far covered. Because at the beginning I says that right, equilibrium position at tendency, we need to achieve this condition. Right. So if we compare with the one that we cover, right? You still remember? At the beginning we had two conditions. Right, we had two conditions. Right. This condition and this condition must be able to fulfill. Right. So if we see the tendency point, right, this is, let's say I'm using good y and good x. Right. So this is our budget line. This is our indifferent curve. Right. So if the tangent, meaning that MRS equal to the price for the x over price for the y. Right. How we can achieve it? So you can see that at the beginning, we can arrange this MRS to this following form. MUX over the price for x equal to MUY over the price for the PY. You must remember along the indifferent curve, right, the MRS, we can transform into MU X, MU Y. But this is also measure the slope for the MRS, same meaning, right? Same meaning, right? So if we rearrange, meaning that we also achieve the first condition, right? Also achieve the first condition, right? This is Y, sorry, this is Y. Right? Achieve the first condition, and then, right? Because the budget line over here, right? Budget line over here show that we are using all the income, meaning that we achieve the second one. So meaning that what you are learning at the beginning is actually same, right? Based on the consumer equilibrium, same, right? Problem indifferent curve tangent at this point, same meaning, right? Because our MRS also can be measured in this following form, right? No problem, right? Because so far we understand that MRS is measured by the changes of Y over changes of X. Also can be represented by, right? Same meaning, right? No problem, same meaning, right? So this is how we can actually manipulate, right? Based on this idea, we can draw in the indifferent curve and the budget line, right? So now let's back to the graph. And let's back to the graph, right? Right. So you can see that, right? In order to achieve the consumer equilibrium, we need to achieve where MRS equal to the price ratio. This is the case, right? For point T, U, and Y, even though we utilize, but we are not maximizing the utility. We utilize all the income. We are not maximizing the utility, right? So only point, these are point X will maximizing the utility, right? No problem. Right. If let's say the point is over here, right? Again, we are not maximizing the utility. At the same time, we still have balance of income that we are not utilizing, right? So only at this point, right, that we will maximizing the utility. At the same time, we utilize all the income, right? So at the end, we can conclude, right? The equilibrium consumption bundle is the best affordable bundle that yield the highest level of satisfaction, right? Because we already compare, right? Right, so we notice that indifferent curve tree give you the highest satisfaction, right? And then you use all the income. So at the optimum point, the slope of the indifferent curve must be equal to the slope of the budget line. Must be the same, must be the same. You can see that, but other than this, right? Just now I show you about what? I also show you that we have mu x over mu y, right? Also, right, represent the same meaning, right? Represent the same meaning, right? Remember, right? Because here, marginal utility, right? Marginal utility, right? Right. So far we did done, right? So do you have any question you want to ask? Right. So far, do you have any question that you want to ask? Right. So far we cover. We know the consumer preferences. We understand the budget line. Right. So we combine indifferent curve and the budget line. So our objective is to maximizing the utility based on the income that we have. You must understand that based on the income that we have, right? So the situation to achieve this condition is that your indifferent curve must be tangent with the budget line. Right? This is the thing that you must understand. Right? Now we have a student ask, can you explain the third property again? We go for third property. Right, third property. Right. So over here, right, again, right. So from here, we understand from the first property, meaning that more is preferred than less, right? Because more give you more utility, right? So you can see that, you can see if we draw a line as a reference, we notice that combination J and combination K. But the quantity for the combination K in terms of video and pizza is more than the J. But right, in this case, meaning that combination K give you higher utility compared to the J if you based on the property number 1, right? But because you cross your indifferent curve, right? It show what? It show that point J and I should make the consumer equally happy. But J and I, because they are on the same indifferent curve, right? So they are, if you consume combination J or combination I, actually no different, because on the same indifferent curve, they give you the same level of utility, right? But if you compare I and K, because they also on the same indifferent curve, by right, they also give you the same level of utility, right? So if we summarize, right, by saying that J and K will make the consumer equally happy, is it true? The answer should be false, false. Why? Because if you compare the quantity of good that can be consumed in combination K and J, you notice that, right, K have more of good compared to J, right? So that's why we conclude that our indifferent curve cannot be crossed, right? Cannot be crossed, right? Otherwise, it will be contradict, right? Otherwise, it will be contradict, right? Right. So, and what does M stand for? Right. So M, right? M over here, right? M meaning that budget line, right? So some of you notice that, hey, what we use M, right? Why we need to use M? What if I want to use Y? Is it possible? If you use Y, this is also Y, meaning that it will be confusing, Right? In this here, they use M because money spent. Right? Money spent. If you want to use I, also can. I means income. Also can. Right? Not really need to put M. You can put I, income. Right? Also can. Right? However, the textbook use M because they define M as money. Right? Any problem? Money spent. Right? Any problem? Right? Any question you want to ask? We still have time. Any problem? Right? Remember, in this consumer equilibrium, we want to maximize, but we had limited income. Right? So meaning that your budget line is actually constrained your ability to consume the good. But your objective is try to maximize it, maximize the utility. Right? You must remember the question, right? So meaning that J and K cannot obtain the similar satisfaction, yes, right? Because you consume more. In K, you can consume more. By right, based on the property number one, right? Property number one says what? If your indifferent curve which is far away from the origin, you will get higher level of utility. Why? Because you can consume more good, right? So meaning that if you cross, you will be violate the property number one, right? Remember? Any other things that make you not clear, right? Because sometimes most of you confused, right? Most of you confused, right? So remember, in different curve, you must draw bound inward, right? When I say bound inward, and then I show you this is the special case, right? Some of you might say, it is possible that we draw our indifferent curve outward sloping. Can we draw our indifferent curve outward sloping? Can or cannot? Any idea? Can or cannot? Based on your understanding. Just now we did go through the property of the indifferent curve, right? Must be downward sloping. Can we draw outward sloping? Can or cannot? Right? So we have a student right respond, right? So for you, because in the property already stated clearly, must be downward sloping, right? Right. So meaning that why we cannot draw outward sloping? Why? And you must know why. Right. Right. But is it possible? Right. Possible. Before we answer possible or not, you must understand why we cannot draw it. You must understand, right? When a normal person, let's say a rational person, we assume the person is rational. They only consume the good that will give you a satisfaction, right? Meaning that the good that will give you a benefit, meaning that the satisfaction, right? So by right, when you draw your indifferent curve which is downward sloping, right? So meaning that you want to maintain your level of the utility, right? Because over here downward sloping, you want to maintain the level of the utility at here, right? In order to maintain, meaning that you need to reduce, right, and then increase another, so that you maintain, right? But if you draw like this, outward sloping, meaning that you consume more, right? You consume more, but the level of utility is still the same. Does it make sense to you? If the good you consume will give you a satisfaction, right? If the good that you consume give you a benefit or a satisfaction, right? You can count, because just now is you based on the property. By right, if you consume more, let's say from here, let's say we draw, let's say this is the case, right? Let's say, right, if you're able to consume more, by right, the level of the utility must be higher, right? But now you draw outward sloping, right? Now you draw outward sloping, meaning that you can consume more, but your level of utility still remain the same. right? The level of the utility is still the same, right? So this is one way lah, right? To see if you consuming the good that will give you a utility, a satisfaction, you should not draw your indifferent curve outward sloping. Right? Clear? Clear or not? It doesn't mean that not enough money, no, right? Are you clear? Right? This is indifferent curve, right? But why? Somehow you search on Google, right? People draw the indifferent curve outward sloping. Why? Because, right? Right? Because they are not consuming the good that will give you satisfaction. Understand? Just now I mentioned to you, right? Just for your understanding only, because now you know, ask me whether it's possible outward sloping or not, right? Even though here also already mentioned cannot be outward sloping, right? Must be downward sloping, but now you want to ask whether it's possible to be outward sloping or not, right? So just now, I let's say we have video, we have pizza. You watch the video or you consume the pizza, both will give you a satisfaction. Okay, then must be downward sloping. But somehow you consume the good, right? That cannot give you a satisfaction, right? For example, pollution, right? If you are a rational person, you go and let's say you go to the place that have a lot of pollution, will you satisfy? Will it give you the benefit? No, right? If that is the case, right, possible, right? Your indifferent curve will be outward sloping. But in this principle microeconomics, we are not we are not assuming the person go to consume the good, right? That will give him or her dissatisfied. We assume the person is rational. A rational person will do something that is benefit to them, rather than do something that is harmful to them. Right? That's why we normally in this principle microeconomics, we always draw the indifferent curve which is downward sloping, because we assume the person is rational. They will not go and consume the good that is harm to them. They will consume the good that is benefit, that will have satisfaction to them. Right? That's why we always draw the indifferent curve which is downward sloping. Right? Unless we have special case such as perfect substitute, perfect complement, right? Still downward sloping, right? Just that the MRS need to be, concerned on it. If you have perfect substitute, meaning that your MRS must be fixed number. But if you have perfect complement, meaning that you must consume in the fixed proportion, right? Then you cannot find your MRS. For example, you want to make a cake, you must have a fixed ingredient, right? If you don't put the fixed ingredient, you cannot make a cake, something like that, right? The logic, right? For example, shoe also same, must be a pair, right? You cannot have another side is you have more shoe and another, right, compared to the another side, right? It doesn't increase your utility, right? So this is the idea, right? Any other things that you want to ask? Any other things? Anything else? Right. So if you don't have any other question, right? So basically we already finish topic 4, right? So remember, right? Remember this is week number 5, right? Make sure that you have your good assignment, Make sure, right? If you still don't have the good assignment, there's something wrong, right? And then at the same time, I noticed that 1 or 2 students, right, never join the class, right? If that student is your good member, inform them, right? Advise them to join the class, right? No problem, to join the class, right? Because attendance will be taken, right? No problem, attendance will be taken, right? So until week 12, but if your attendance is at less than 80%, your name will be listed in the bar list. You need to explain, right? For me, as long you join the class, your name appear over here, right? Even though for 10 seconds, 10 seconds appear over here, when I download from here, right? Your name appear, consider you attend the class, I consider you attend, even though for 10 seconds only you join because of internet problem or whatsoever, right? You cannot connect anymore, right? So I still consider you join the class, right? Remember? Right, as long your name appear over here lah, right? Right. You remember, because later on I will download, right? I will download, right? If you want, I don't know whether you can see the, right? I don't know whether you can see this or not, right? You can see that, right? This is attendance report. After finish the recording, there will be an attendance report, right? So yours, if you can download, you can see your name whether it's inside or not, right? If your name not inside, meaning that mostly you will be absent, right? After finish the recording, you can see that the attendance report will be below, right? Will be below. Right? If you want to know whether you are attending the class or not, right? You can check over here, right? No problem. Any other things you want to ask? Any other things? But if not, I thank you for attending the class. Right, so you can leave the meeting now. Right, thank you. Sorry for the internet connection. Right.